It was a time of deep trouble, the 1930s. America was caught in the grip of the Great Depression. The dust blew across the plains, covering everything. Farms failed, banks closed their doors forever. People lost their jobs, people lost their homes, people lost their hope. They stood in long lines, waiting for a piece of bread, waiting for a cup of soup. It was a time when tomorrow didn't promise anything better than today. For many, the American dream felt like a cruel joke, a story told to them as children that had no truth in the harsh light of day. This was the world that created its own kind of heroes and villains, sometimes blurring the line between the two. In the heart of Texas, the sun beat down with a relentless heat. Families huddled together in makeshift shacks, wondering where their next meal would come from. The government seemed far away, its promises empty. The only people who seemed to be winning were the banks that took the farms, the powerful men who never seemed to suffer. For a young man or woman with a spark of ambition, the future looked like a long, empty road. Young man, young woman. There were few paths to success, few ways to escape the grinding poverty that defined a generation. It was an environment that pushed ordinary people to consider extraordinary things, to break the rules in a game that felt rigged against them from the start. This was the backdrop for a story that would soon capture the nation's attention. Her name was Bonnie Parker, a small woman with bright eyes, blonde hair. She was just a girl really, working as a waitress in a dreary cafe. But she had big dreams. She loved poetry. She wrote about her feelings, her hopes, her fears. She imagined a life on the silver screen, a life of glamour, excitement, far from the dusty streets of West Dallas, married at 16, her husband in prison. Her life felt stuck, waiting for something to happen, for someone to change her world. She had no idea how dramatically it would change, or the dark path that awaited her. And then, he appeared. Clyde Barrow. Not much older than Bonnie. Handsome, in a dangerous sort of way. A quick smile. Cold eyes that had seen trouble. He grew up poor, early life of petty crime. He'd already been to prison. It hardened him. It filled him with hatred for the law. He vowed never to be powerless again. Once Clyde was paroled in 1932, he didn't waste any time. He had no intention of living a straight life. The world of hard work and low pay held no appeal for him. He wanted quick money and the thrill of the chase. He and Bonnie started small. They robbed gas stations, they robbed small-town grocery stores. It wasn't about getting rich, not at first. It was about survival, about having enough money for food, about gas to get to the next town. They were joined by others along the way, forming the loose-knit group that would become known as the Barrow Gang. But at its core, it was always about Bonnie and Clyde. Their methods were often clumsy, their robberies messy. They were not master criminals. They were desperate amateurs, armed and dangerous. A typical robbery would involve Clyde bursting into a store, gun drawn, demanding cash from the register. Bonnie would often wait in the car, the engine running, ready for a quick getaway. Things often went wrong. They would get less money than they expected, or a brave store clerk would try to fight back. These small-time heists soon escalated. The name of the game was speed. Clyde was an expert driver, and his car of choice was the Ford V8. It was fast, powerful, and reliable. It was the perfect tool for their trade. They could rob a bank in one state and be across the border into another before the authorities even had a chance to set up a roadblock. This ability to cross state lines was a major advantage. Back then, law enforcement agencies didn't communicate well with each other. A police officer in Texas had no jurisdiction in Oklahoma. Bonnie and Clyde exploited this weakness masterfully, zigzagging across the Midwest and the South, always staying one step ahead. Their escapes became the stuff of legend. There was the time they were cornered in a garage apartment in Joplin, Missouri. A fierce shootout erupted. When the smoke cleared, 2 officers were dead, and the gang was gone. They had to leave most of their belongings behind, but they had escaped again. It was a pattern that repeated itself. In the spring of 1933, after the bloody shootout in Joplin, Missouri, the police found something unexpected. The gang had fled in such a hurry that they left behind a camera with a roll of undeveloped film. When the police developed it, they couldn't believe their eyes. Here were pictures of the outlaws, not looking like fearsome killers but like playful young people on an adventure. There was Bonnie, cigar in her mouth, pistol in her hand, striking a defiant pose. There was Clyde, leaning against their stolen Ford V8 with a shotgun. They were smiling, laughing, performing for the camera. When these photos hit the newspapers, they caused a sensation. The images were published everywhere. They instantly transformed the public's perception of the gang. Before, they were just names in a crime report. Now, they had faces. They were young, stylish, bold. To the banks, the police, and the government, there was no question. They had robbed and killed without remorse. They represented a breakdown of law and order, a threat to society. The newspapers often called them rats and vipers, painting them as monsters who preyed on innocent people. For the families of the police officers they had killed, they were nothing short of evil. This was the official story, the one told by the authorities who were desperately trying to hunt them down. But for many ordinary people, the story was different. Remember the times, the Great Depression. People felt betrayed by the system. They had lost their savings when the banks failed. They had lost their farms to foreclosure. In their eyes, the banks and the government were the real criminals. So when they read about Bonnie and Clyde robbing those same banks, some people cheered. They saw the duo not as killers but as rebels. They were David fighting Goliath. By early 1934, the law had had enough. The Barrow Gang's trail of dead officers across multiple states was an embarrassment and an outrage. The federal government was now involved, but the real hunt was led by a man named Frank Hamer. Hamer was a legendary Texas Ranger, tough, quiet, relentless. He had seen it all. He was old school. He didn't talk much, but he knew how to track a man down. The head of the Texas prison system hired Hamer personally with one simple instruction: hunt down and stop Bonnie and Clyde. He was given the authority to do whatever it took. Hamer was a different kind of opponent. He wasn't like the local police who could be outrun or outgunned. He was a methodical hunter. He didn't chase Clyde, he studied him. He learned Clyde's habits, his patterns, the way he thought. Hamer knew that the gang was constantly on the move. The morning of May 23, 1934 was hot and humid. Just another day in rural Louisiana. Along a quiet country road, 6 lawmen waited in silence. They had been hiding since before dawn, their patience wearing thin. Then, they heard it. The distinct sound of a powerful engine approaching. A Ford V8 sedan, moving fast. It was them. Clyde was behind the wheel, driving in his socks as he often did to better feel the pedals. Bonnie was beside him, eating a sandwich. They had no idea they were driving into a trap. There would be no warnings, no calls to surrender. As the car drew near, one of the gang's family members, who had been planted there as part of the trap, appeared by the side of the road. Clyde slowed the car down. It was a fatal mistake. The moment the car slowed, Frank Hamer stepped out from the bushes and yelled. But it was just a formality. Before he could even finish, the posse opened fire. The sound was deafening. A storm of steel ripped through the car. Over 130 bullets slammed into the vehicle, shredding the metal, shattering the glass. The car, riddled with holes, rolled slowly forward and crashed into a ditch. When the shooting finally stopped, an eerie silence fell over the road. The lawmen cautiously approached the vehicle. The 2 famous outlaws, who had terrorized the Midwest for 2 years, were dead.